So, good evening. Thank you for inviting me the possibility to be here in Slovakia. And today we want to talk about capitalism. I know for a lot of people it's a dirty word, a bad word, capitalism. And I travel everywhere in the world. Last year I was in 17 countries. This year I will be in more than 30 countries to speak about this topic. And sometimes I have a lot of interviews with journalists and TV. I have only 15 seconds or 20 seconds to explain why I have this t-shirt, I love capitalism. Not today, but sometimes I wear this t-shirt with I love capitalism. And when I have only a few seconds time, then I tell people this story. 200 years ago, before capitalism, almost 90% of the worldwide population lived in extreme poverty. Today, it's less than 10%. And what's even more important, half of this reduction, excuse me, can you tell these people it disturbs me?
That's translation.
Okay. You can sit here. Here's free.
Thanks a lot.
So, what I think is important, before capitalism, 90% of the worldwide population lived in poverty, and today it's less than 10%. But it's more important that half of this reduction happened over the last 40 years. And why is this so important? Maybe some of you heard about this French economist, left-wing economist, Thomas Piketty. And for him, the worst time of capitalism is the last 30 or 40 years. Why? Because in his theory, inequality was reduced over the 20th century, but in the last 30 or 40 years, people became more unequal this time. And this rise of inequality is the biggest concern for him. But at the same time, the number of people living in poverty was reduced so much. And so I think this is very important to know these facts. You see, even in 1981, 42.7% of the worldwide population lived in extreme poverty. And what does it mean, poverty, 200 years ago? It means something totally different what we associate with poverty today. It means I have here these facts that about 20% of inhabitants of England and France, what were the wealthiest nations at this time, were even not able to walk because they were so weak that they were condemned, most of them, to life of begging. This was what poverty meant at this time, 200 years ago, before capitalism. Because some people, they don't understand what was the situation before capitalism. They think it's something like a modern excursion to the land side. But it was much different before capitalism. And another thing, if you hear fame, the people have hunger, starvation, I think most of you will associate Africa first. We all do this, but it's wrong. 80% of all people who died in famines in the last century died in Soviet Union and in China. Only one example. Who has ever heard from you about this so-called Great Leap Forward from Mao Zedong, the biggest socialist experiment in history? Can someone please raise your hand? These are a lot of congratulations here, because I ask this question everywhere in the world, and whether I speak to 30 people or sometimes 1,000 or 2,000, there are only very few people here. Can you raise again stuff? It's a lot, so it's a lot, it's amazing. It never happened to me before, congratulations, because I asked the same question whether I'm in Latin America, in Asia, in Europe, in the United States, and I think it is a disaster that this great leap forward, where 45 million people died. 45 million people died. Most of the people have never heard anything at school about it. So I think this is a great, I think socialists are PR genius to sell us such a system where so many people died as kind of humanity, and to sell us capitalism where so many people escaped poverty, sell us as inhuman. And of course, the counter-argument is, yes, maybe capitalism reduced poverty, but what about inequality? And I spoke about China, and with the introduction of private property rights, you see the inequality is bigger today in China than it was before. Here you see it on this graph. The number of people living in extreme poverty in China, 88% in 1981. 88%. Today it's less than 1%, according to official World Bank data. At the same time, the number of billionaires increased. At Mao's time, there was not a single billionaire. Maybe Mao was a billionaire, I don't know. But there was not a single billionaire. Today, you have almost so many billionaires in China than in United States. Even in Beijing, you have more billionaires than in New York City today, for example. So it means the number of billionaires increased, at the same time the number of people living in poverty decreased. And why is this so important? It's not only in China, it happened all over the world. You see here, this is the number of people living in poverty, blue, reduced. Number of billionaires increased. Why is this important? Because the core belief of all socialists is what I call zero-sum belief. What does it mean? They think that rich people can only become rich because they take something away from poor people. This is what all socialists believe. And so their solution is redistribution. If people became only rich because they took it away from the poor, so we have to take it away from the rich with high taxes or expropriation or whatever to give it back to the poor. But this zero-sum thinking is totally nonsense. You see it here. How to explain that the number of people living in poverty decreased and at the same time the number of billionaires increased? How to explain it if zero-sum thinking would be correct? And you can see it in a lot of countries. 2 months ago I was in Vietnam. What a lot of people don't know, Vietnam was in 1990 the poorest country in the world. You know, they had first this terrible war, then they had terrible socialism, and the war destroyed a lot, socialism destroyed the rest. And in Vietnam, they were poorer than the poorest African countries in 1990. They were really poor. And then they started in 1986 with their so-called Doi Moi reforms, pro-market reforms, introduced private property. Of course, they call themselves today communist or socialist country. In China, they call themselves the same. But it's harder to find any Marxist in Vietnam than to find in Europe or in United States. So they call themselves communists or socialists, but no one believes in Karl Marx and this stuff there. They believe in capitalism. And what was the effect? The number of people who live in poverty was more than 80%. Today it's less than 5%. Standard of living increased. And the number of rich people increased. They have 7 billionaires now in Vietnam and a lot of millionaires. So you see, zero-sum thinking, what is the core belief from anti-capitalists, is totally wrong. And here is the result when I talk about inequality of another book I can recommend to you, Balder Scheidel, The Great Leveler. It's great survey about inequality. What were the real reasons in history when inequality was reduced? And it were 4 main reasons. First reason, war. 20th century is an example, even in the theory of Thomas Piketty, and he's correct in this way, that the biggest reduction in inequality was during First World War and Second World War. This was the biggest reason of reducing inequality in the 20th century. First World War, Second World War. I have a lot of facts about this in my book. The second reason is revolution, like communist revolution or revolution in China, and all this where a lot of people, so many people died, as a result of communist revolutions. More than 100 million people died. This was the second effect from that people are more equal. The third in history, and it's not only about 20th century, it's about the whole history, was state failure and system collapse, and the fourth was plague. So these were the reasons, the real reasons, why inequality was reduced. And on the other hand, the reason why poverty was reduced, very peaceful developments. Very peaceful developments. So you see, if you want to reduce poverty, you don't need wars, you don't need revolution, you don't need state failure or plague if you reduce poverty. No, what you need is capitalism, because this is the secret for reduction of poverty. But of course, I know there are a lot of people today who even agree with this. In Germany now, the bestseller book is unfortunately not my book, but it's a book with the title The End of Capitalism. And it's written by a very left-leaning journalist. I had some discussions with her. And even she admits today, she says in her book, we have to abolish capitalism. And she tells us we should forbid people driving a private car, we should forbid them to fly, we should tell them how they live and what to eat and how often they can eat meat and all this stuff. So it's like an ecotopia version. And she says the best economic model for us was the economy in war times in Great Britain. So this is what she tells us. But what is interesting, why do I mention it? Because, on the other hand, she admits now in her book, capitalism was great. There was a reduction in poverty. And she quotes, of course, very often Karl Marx. And even Karl Marx admitted it, that capitalism made a lot of progress for people. And so you can't discuss with her today about poverty, because she admits, yes, you're right, capitalism was good, but now it's bad and we have to abolish it. And why? Because, of course, climate change and environmental problems. And I compared 2 indices. The first one, who of you have heard about the economic freedom from Heritage Foundation. Maybe you can raise. These are a few. For the others, I can tell you, you can get it for free on the internet. Every year, it's like 500 pages. Very interesting. Before I travel to a country, first I look index of economic freedom. It's not always correct, but in a lot of cases you get first information. It's a ranking about 180 nations. How economically free are they? You can call it also the capitalism scale. So at the top, the most capitalist countries in the world, these are Singapore, Switzerland, then we have New Zealand, Australia, such countries. And at the bottom of the list, we have North Korea and Venezuela and Cuba and a lot of African countries that are economically suppressed. So this is one index I can recommend you to. It's for free. You can get it for free on the internet. It's 500 pages from Heritage Foundation. And then there's another index. It's the EPI, Environmental Performance Index. May I ask also who have heard about this EPI index? There's two of you, okay? So I can explain it for everyone. This is from Yale University, and it's a ranking about environmental conditions in different countries. And now you can compare both of these indexes. And in the index of economic freedom, we have these 5 categories. Free, it's like Singapore, Switzerland, for example. Mostly free, it's like Germany, United States, and so on. Moderately free, I think Slovakia belongs to this category, if I'm correct, moderately free. But maybe it's free, something between mostly free and mostly free and moderately free. And then mostly unfree, of course, there's a lot of, and then repressed is like a lot of African countries, as I mentioned, Cuba and North Korea. And then you can see, if you compare it with the environmental performance score from the Yale University, you see it's very easy. The countries with the best environmental conditions are the countries that are economically free, and with a very bad environmental performance are the countries that are repressed. Here another example. You know, the mistake with socialists, they like to compare their utopia with reality. They have a book, if you ask them, but where is realized socialism? Because, you know, all real socialist systems, they will tell you that this was not real socialism. But they have their book, their utopia, and I think this is not, I think it's not really fair, so I have another way how I compare things. Because if you compare a book with reality, it's like, for example, maybe, are you married?
No.
You have a girlfriend?
No,
No. You? Everyone not married. Okay, you? You are married, yes? But you have a girlfriend, yes? And if you come home this evening and she said, we have to talk about something. You know, it's about, you can't get divorced because you're not married, but she want to leave you. Yes, and why is that? Would you be surprised then, this way? Or not?
I think
You were surprised, but I tell you the reason. She started to read these romantic love novels, you know, that you can get at the railway station. How great the perfect love is, where they kiss every morning at the breakfast and so on, all over the day's harmony. And then she tells you, okay, I compared our relationship with what I read there. It's a big disaster. I think you would tell her, it's not really fair. Please compare it with our friends, maybe, and their relationship. And then it's more fair. And this is what I do then. If they tell me, let's discuss about capitalism, socialism, I have this theory, I keep it away. It's the same as comparing your marriage with this romantic love novel. I compare things that you can compare, for example, East-West Germany. I have another book, not this book, the title, but it will also be published in your language. The title is Capitalism is not the problem but the solution. And I compared a lot of countries like East-West Germany. By the way, I produced also a film about it. You can Google it on the internet. It's Life Behind the Berlin Wall. And I'm proud because I got the award for Best Short Movie at Freedom Fest in Las Vegas this year. And it's Life Behind the Berlin Wall. And we have a lot of facts like this. You see here, annual per capita CO2 emissions, East-West Germany. It was much more in East Germany than it was in West Germany, and not only with CO2 emissions. For a time ago, we had a lot of discussion about sulfur dioxide and so on, this air pollution. But look here, compare the numbers. Germany, the same country, the same people, the same history, the same language. The only difference, different economic system. Socialism, capitalism. And so I can't understand why people tell me we have to do something against climate change. I agree, but the solution is abolish capitalism and we have to have something like planned economy. Maybe they don't call it a planned economy, but there's a suggestion that is really planned economy. You had it 2 months ago, you know, this Greta Thunberg. They had an interview with her, what to do against climate change. You know, her first solution is we all should be panic right now. I don't understand if there would be a fire here right now and after, please everyone panic right now. I think it's not the best solution for this. But now she has another solution, abolish capitalism. And it's crazy, abolish capitalism, because it will be the worst what can happen for our environment and for climate change. And then there's another argument. Okay, they say, but resources of our planet are limited, and so unlimited growth is not possible. They tell you, and it sounds, first glance, of course, very logical. Everyone, yes, sure, this. But it is not. Look here, my cell phone, everyone has it. How many devices? This is typical capitalism. Imagine this iPhone, and it was more than 30 devices. These are not all. And what do you think were more resources were spent for this iPhone or for all these products? So growth doesn't mean always that we need more resources. The same with music. When I was young, I had this old, LPs, and then later on I had this small CDs. And today, my girlfriend, who's much younger than me, she laughs at me when I have the CDs. Why do you buy the CDs? I know no one who buys CDs. Only my grandfather does the same. And yes, so you see, what is better for the environment? And where do you need more resources? Of course, for this long LPs and for this CDs, but not today, or with books. I was very proud when I was young. I had a lot of discs and a lot of books. Today, I don't know how many. I haven't counted them. 6,000, 7,000. I don't know how many books I have at home. But my father, who's now, in March, he will be 94 years old. And he's much more up to date than me because he don't buy any more books. He has his Kindle. It's easier for him to read. And what do you think? Who needs more resources? I, with my 6,000 or 7,000 books, or my father with his Kindle today. So you see, what sounds logical at first glance, the resources of the earth are limited, and so unlimited growth is not possible. It sounds better than it is if you look deeper into the facts. And then there is another. We had this survey. I will tell you later about the survey that we had in 33 countries today about the image of capitalism. And we wanted to know what people don't like on capitalism. And number one was this: capitalism is dominated by the rich. They set the political agenda. I can tell you, for Germany, where I come from, it's not true. We would have a totally different policy. If the rich would rule, we phased out nuclear power plants. No rich people wanted to phase out nuclear power plants. They made a lot of money with this. And then they phased out coal power plants, and they forbade fracking and all this stuff. No one would make these crazy decisions if rich people would rule in Germany, of course not. But United States is another thing. I take always the argument where the argument is strongest. And for United States, you know, no one can be president if he's not able to raise a lot of money, funds to become president. This is true, but on the other hand, it's not so easy as they tell us the rich rule, because if rich people would rule, Donald Trump would have never been president of the United States. Yes, he raised a lot of money, but Hillary Clinton raised 2 times more than him, 1.2 billion against 600 million. And here you see, as of September 2016, not a single Fortune 100 CEO had donated to Trump's campaign. Later they came when they saw that he will win, and they thought maybe it's a kind of insurance. When he will win, they supported him. But they were not on his side. And Donald Trump would never have become president of the United States if it is so easy that the rich people rule there. And especially today, this would be, if rich people would rule, this would be president of the United States today. And not Joe Biden, because you see here, he wanted to be president for the Democratic Party. And at the time of the campaign, he was the 8th richest man in the world. His net worth is $62 billion. And he spent $1 billion within 3 months. There was never anybody in history who spent so much money, $1 billion in 3 months, for his election campaign. And success, zero success. Joe Biden won, and compared with him, he's really poor. So if the rich would rule, he would be president of the United States. By the way, I think he would be much better president than Joe Biden and Donald Trump was. But unfortunately, the rich don't rule, and so he became not president. And for my book, you know, I tell you what I don't like with anti-capitalists. They don't like to read books from people with other opinion. They don't like to read it. If I post something on the internet about my book in Germany on Facebook and so, I have a lot of comments. Oh, this book is really shit, and so, and negative comments. Then I ask only one thing: have you read the book? No, I would never read a book like this. So they prefer to read book number 34, Why Capitalism is Evil, than only to touch one book like this. It can be dangerous, because if the facts, and you find a lot of facts in this book, are against their ideology, it makes them uncertain, and so they don't read books like this. But I, on the other hand, I read a lot of books from anti-capitalists. I like to read them, these books. And I like to read a lot of books from people who think different than me. And one of them, this is the reason why I tell you, is Larry M. Bartels. He's a political scientist in the United States. He's more left-leaning, and he's more criticizing the influence of rich people. But I think he's moderate. He's so fair that he made this research about 16 presidential election campaigns from 1952 to 2012. And I added the last here, the election with Hillary Clinton, and so you have 17 elections over the past 64 years, and in only 2 of them, unequal campaign spending was a decisive factor for the election. So money, and this is not the research from anyone who thinks similar to me. On the contrary, he's much more left-leaning, but he has to admit only in 2 out of 17 elections, money was a decisive factor in the United States. And then there's another research, it's quoted everywhere in every book about the topic. They made research, they asked wealthy people, it was now 10 years ago, in 2012, they asked wealthy people about their priorities in politics. And they wanted to prove that the politicians act according to the priorities of rich people. And this was the result. Rich people, their first priority was budget deficits. And their last priority was climate change. The good thing is, this is 10 years ago, 2012. And now, 10 years later, or now 13 years later, 11 years later, we can see what happened. Did the politicians act according to the priorities of rich people? No, on the contrary. You see, at the time of this survey, the debt in the United States was 15.6 trillion, and since then it has doubled. It was 100% of GDP, today it's 133%. So Obama didn't fulfill their wishes, and Trump didn't fulfill it this way. And of course, Joe Biden did not. So it's not so easy. Of course, I can't give you all the facts here. This book is full of facts. There was a review in Germany from, the politician who made the review wrote, Zitelmann, me, is a fanatic with facts. So, and he's right. I like facts more than ideology. Let's come to one of the last arguments, monopolies. What's about monopolies? Yes, capitalism is evil. We have these big monopolies, Google, Facebook, and Apple, and all these monopolies. And so this is the reason why capitalism is evil. But they don't know so much about history. Monopolies last not so long as people think. This was a so-called monopoly in 2007. This was the headline in Guardian. Will MySpace ever lose its monopoly? Who knows MySpace here in this room? Okay, some of the older ones, the younger ones don't know. What's MySpace? Have never heard about it. Will MySpace ever lose its monopoly? Was the question there. And the same year, Forbes magazine, Nokia, 1 billion customers. Can anyone catch the cell phone king? Who has Nokia today from you here in this room? Oh, there are 3. Okay, can anyone catch the cell phone king? 2007. The same here, Xerox, market share was 95%, a real monopoly. Today it's 2%. Even today in the United States, some people speak about Xeroxing, yes, because they have this monopoly. They don't last so long as people think. When they are on the top of the power, everyone thinks they will last forever. But who's the enemy of monopolies? Were these monopolies destroyed by antitrust laws or by the government? No, they were destroyed by capitalism, by competition. Though the biggest enemy of monopoly is capitalism, is free market. And it's not the state, and it's not antitrust regulation and all this stuff. Or here, Kodak, 90% market share in the United States for film, in the film market, and 85% in camera market. Then the underestimated shift to digital cameras, and you know what happened? Insolvent, bankrupt, 2012. So, monopoly, another example. I could give you a lot more examples, but the funny thing is, when you discuss with anti-capitalists about economy, first, they are very angry against monopolies. And in the end of the discussion, when you ask them how to solve our problems, they speak about nationalization, for example, from large companies. I don't understand. This is the only monopoly that is really hard to get rid of, the state monopoly. And how to be against monopoly? In the next day moment, then against capitalism, what destroys monopoly, and then in favor of state monopoly. This sounds not very logical for me. So in the end, I will give you some facts about survey. In the book, I think we have about 25 countries, which is a lot. In the German edition, we have only 24 countries. In the English edition, we have only 21. You have more, but it's going on and on, the process. Because I commissioned a poll, now it's in 33 countries, and I will give you results from this poll. But first I have to tell you something. The survey was done by one of the most prestigious polling institutes in the world. It's Ipsos Mori. Ipsos Mori is one of the leading polling institutes in the world. And it was not only a single question, it was about the image of capitalism. But it was not only a single question, do you like capitalism, yes or no? But we had 34 different statements to find out what people think about capitalism. And the first set of questions was without using the word capitalism, only to describe what capitalism is. Why? Because capitalism has a bad connotation for most of the people in most countries. We knew it before, everyone knows it. Capitalism, for a lot of people, it's a dirty word, a bad word. And we wanted to find out how much has it to do with the word and how much has it to do what the word stands for. For this reason, first we had 6 questions without using the word capitalism. Like, question like this: the state should set the prices for rent and food and should set minimum and maximum wages, otherwise the system is socially unfair. Someone who supported a statement like this is from the free market. On the other hand, a statement like, I think private business alone should decide what products to manufacture and what prices to charge for them. The state should not be involved. That he's pro-free market. You see here in Slovakia, 13% support this statement, 32% support the other statement. And then we calculated what we call a pro and anti-capitalism coefficient. How did we do it? There are 3 positive statements, 3 negative statements. Then we calculated the average percentage, and then we divided the average percentage of the positive and negative statements, and this is the pro and anti-capitalism coefficient. And then we had other questions where we used the word capitalism. We asked everyone, if you hear the word capitalism, what do you think about? What are your associations? Greed, corruption. Here's a positive thing. Wide range of goods, innovation positive, progress positive, environmental. But you see here, it's I should add a third one. Then we had 18 different statements about capitalism. Here were the positive statements. Capitalism means that consumers determine what is offered and not the state. 23%. Encourage people to do their best. 21%. Means economic freedom. 16%. By the way, in Vietnam, it was at the top with something like 90%, means economic freedom. And these were the positive statements, and then the negative statements get much more support. Is dominated by the rich. They set the political agenda, leads to growing inequality, promotes selfishness and greed, repeatedly leads to new crises, leads to monopolies, addicts people to buy products they don't need, is responsible for hunger and poverty, and so on. And then we calculated also, as we did it before, the average percentage of positive and negative statements, and to come out to this coefficient. And here's the result. This is only for the first set of questions where we didn't use the word capitalism. You see, the most pro-free market countries are Poland, by far most support for free market, followed by United States, Czech Republic, your neighbor, South Korea, Japan, Argentina, Sweden. These are the countries where most people supported free market. And you see here, where Slovakia, have you seen it? It's here. Similar to Austria, almost the same as Austria. Nepal also, yes. And, but this is only when we didn't use the word capitalism. And here is the overall pro-anti-capitalism coefficient for all our 34 statements. And you see, it's similar but not identical, because Czech Republic is also good here, but not as it was before. But anyway, here it's number 2, 3, 4, 5. It's here one of the first, Czech Republic, and then you have there, and you see Slovakia is here, similar to Italy, for example. You see there are some countries more anti-capitalist than in your country, but there are more countries that are less anti-capitalist or more pro-capitalist. This is one result. And even we could calculate the effect of using the word capitalism. If we compare the results, you see the effect. This is the percentage how the support for capitalism increased if you don't use the word. For example, here you see in Germany, 47% more support for capitalism if you don't use the word, because the word has a negative meaning for most of the people, but not in all countries. You have some countries like Russia, it was the contrary, so even it decreased then, if we use the word capitalism or not. And then I had another hypothesis. It was anti-capitalists are conspiracy theorists. You know, during the Corona crisis, we spoke a lot about conspiracy theories. There were some people who thought Bill Gates invited coronavirus to make money with the vaccine and all this stuff. There were a lot of crazy theories, conspiracy theories. And usually it's linked to right-wing thinking. And of course there are crazy right-wing people who believe conspiracy theories. Think about QAnon, for example, in the United States. But I thought that anti-capitalism is also a version of conspiracy theory. And how to prove it? You know, first we had all these questions. I showed you the questions, 34, about capitalism. And so we knew who is pro and who is anti-capitalist, okay? Then we asked two other questions. Or we confronted our respondents with these two statements. First statement is here: in reality, politicians don't decide anything. They are puppets controlled by powerful forces in the background. And the other is, a lot of things in politics can only be properly understood if you know that there's a larger plan behind them, something that most people, however, do not know. People who supported both of these statements are, for me, typical conspiracy theorists. And then we could compare whether anti-capitalists or pro-capitalists support conspiracy theories. And I remember when I got the result, I had a presentation like I have today here. It was in Sweden, and I got them on my iPhone and I looked at them, and I was really fascinated because, of course, I hoped that my theory that anti-capitalists, that they are conspiracy theories, was supported by this. But what I didn't expect that it was supported so much. Please don't look here the difference between the countries. They are important in a way. You see that there are only 2 countries where more people believe in conspiracy theories than in Slovakia. The other countries are Greece and Romania. But this is not the important thing here. The important thing is to compare the left dark bar and the right bright bar, because these are the dedicated anti-capitalists and these are the pro-capitalists. And what can you see here? That in every country, anti-capitalists support more conspiracy theory than pro-capitalists. The only country where there are 2 countries, I think one we don't have here on the graph. This is Albania, it was different. And the other one, where do we have here? United States. So you see, it's very close. It's also here that anti-capitalists are more in favor of conspiracy theory than pro-capitalists, but the difference is not so big. It's 2.3 against 2.8. These are the typical Trump supporters who say, yes, I'm pro-capitalist, but on the other hand, they believe in conspiracy theories and QAnon and this crazy stuff. But here you see in your country, it's a huge difference here with the coefficient. There are very few anti-capitalists who believe in conspiracy theories, but pro-capitalists who believe in conspiracy theories, but anti-capitalists believe very much in conspiracy theories. Because they think these are the super rich and the lobbyists and they control everything. So these were some results of the poll, some things of my book. Of course, in the book you find much more. I could speak hours and hours about it because I have 10 chapters about the 10 myths about capitalism, and I could speak only about a few. And then there's another big chapter about socialism because young people don't know so much about socialism. So I learned you know more than in the other countries where I have my lecture. So congratulations here. And so we can have now a discussion